Recently, I had the opportunity to borrow an Orient Star diver, and it really impressed me. In fact, once I gave it back, I kept thinking about it. I kept thinking, maybe I want to own that Orient Star diver. So I started to keep an eye out for it. And when I did that, I then started to see some of the other models from Orient Star, and then they grabbed my attention. And then this one popped up, and I just had to buy it. Hello, you're watching James. My name's James, you're watching me, and I am talking about watches. And I was so enamored by that diver from Orient Star that I just wanted to own one for myself. But then when I started looking and I found this one, I knew that this was the right Orient Star for me. Now, Orient Star is sort of the premium line of watches for Orient. They're sort of a bit of a step up in quality. It's not a step up like Seiko to Grand Seiko, but perhaps it's a bit of a step up like Seiko to King Seiko. I think that's about where the level is between the two. But this is a very different style of watch to anything that I'd actually seen from the Orient Star lineup before. This one is called the Outdoor, and Orient Star lists this as having characteristics of a field watch. They don't say it's a field watch, they say it's got characteristics of a field watch. And when I look at this watch, I think it has characteristics of a pilot watch, which is probably why it's grabbed my attention so much, because I do like pilot watches. Now, I've had this watch in hand a couple of days now, and I really just want to share with you my first thoughts, because there's been a few things that have really stood out to me about this one. And it has also confirmed that buying this watch was the right choice for me. So let's check out this watch in a first impressions style video. So yes, characteristics of a field watch. Well, I don't quite see that when I see this watch. I just think of sort of characteristics of a pilot watch. But what I do see is the best hang tag I've ever seen before. That is actually the best hang tag I've ever seen. Not that that matters at all. What actually matters is this particular watch that's just arrived. And when it did arrive, there were 6 things that really stood out to me. The first of which is the blue dial, because if you're looking at it right there, it doesn't actually look blue, it looks black. But if you get it at the right angle, the blue will just shine through. This is one of those dials that generally almost always sort of looks black unless it gets hit by that light, and then the blue just jumps out. It's actually quite nice. I was a little bit unsure about having a blue dial of this sort of style, but having something that is really subtle like that, but then sort of almost surprises you when the light hits it, is really, really nice. The second thing that actually surprised me is the markers, because they are actually applied. They're sort of a polished silver, then backfilled with lume. I thought they were printed, but if you actually look really closely on an angle, you'll actually see that they are applied. The third thing that stood out to me is something that I love about certain watches when they arrive, and this happens. Hasn't happened very often, but whenever it does, I definitely point it out. It's that solid bezel, and it's the shape of that solid bezel. It is sort of a concave. Is it concave or convex? I never remember, but it goes inward, which I actually really like. It sort of captures the light a little bit, sort of creates a reflection, but it's just a really nice detail. I've had it on a couple of watches, and every time that I've had it on a watch, it has stood out to me as something that is just a simple, easy detail, but does tend to be quite nice. The next thing that stood out to me was actually the case shape, and you'll see it more when I actually put it on wrist, because it really sits down on wrist. Sort of got that sort of brush side, then this massive chamfer which has been polished on the sides there. It's probably the biggest chamfer I've ever seen. A little bit of brushing on top. And then when you turn the watch over, you'll see a see-through case back, which is nice, but just have a look at the window, the shape of that. It's sort of sticking up and out of the case back. That really stood out to me. I don't think I've actually seen something like that before. Doesn't really make much of a difference at all. Doesn't sort of sit strangely on wrist at all because of that. It's just different, and therefore it stood out to me. And lastly, it was the quality of the strap and the nice sort of deployant clasp there. This is one of those ones where it sits the other way, which I'm starting to get used to. I've got another watch in the collection at the moment that also does this, and I'm just trying to wear it the way that it comes. And I'm starting to get used to it. I'm not really sure if it's still the right way, but I'm getting there. But the quality is actually what stood out to me. I think Orient Star is definitely the more premium sort of range of Orient watches. And when I look at this one closely, when I look at the previous Orient Star that I've actually had and been able to have that opportunity to borrow for a long period of time, it really does show that they are something a little bit extra special. Now, I don't normally show the Lume in these first impressions video because normally I've only had the watch for a very short time, but last night this Lume just lit up my wrist. I hadn't even put any charge into that Lume deliberately. It had just been getting some light from just having the lights on, and then I walked into a slightly dark room and I noticed it glowing on my wrist. So I just wanted to point out that Lume too. That's really cool and really, really bright. Now, obviously, they're referring to it as having field watch sort of characteristics. I think it looks a little bit more like a pilot watch, but I don't actually think it's either of those. This is more maybe like a Garda watch, but with some field watch, maybe pilot watch sort of inspiration. But I like how it's got the sort of power indicator up there, the logo down here. I don't know, I just think it's a nicely sort of laid out dial, and it's a nice set of dimensions, making it really nice on wrist too. And I've owned so many watches now that I just know when one arrives and I start wearing it, I know when something's going to last in the collection a little bit longer term. Sometimes watches arrive and I go, yes, that's really nice, but I can kind of feel that, yeah, okay, it's a temporary watch. I'm just going to enjoy it until I don't enjoy it anymore. But then there's watches like this that I put on and I think, yeah, I think this one is going to be hanging around for some time. Therefore, I'm going to be wearing this one for some time before I come back to the full review. This is not a new release, so there's no real need for me to rush to get to review out there. They've been out for a while, they're not the current model. So instead, I'm going to have it on wrist for a few months and then come back to it and do a really in-depth review of this one. But whilst we wait for that one, maybe check out these two videos next.